just really quickly, for those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Veronica Chapa-Gorczynski. I'm the president of the East End District. So we're the management district that just serves the East End. I'm a longtime friend and partner of Link because they do incredible work and research. So I was honored that y'all asked to have us as the host for today. So just kind of as a housekeeping piece, we are recording this. So we can share the link with the board members who were no-shows or had other obligations, is the more diplomatic way I should state that, correct? And the reason why we care about equity, and I'm going to just try to keep it short. So for the East End District and just sitting in this chair, why the discussion of equity is so important to us is because when we talk about equality, it's, we want access, it's like par. I think when we're talking about equity, for a lot of the neighborhoods that we represent, it's a catch up. It's not even par with what other people are getting. We're trying to, in 2021, I'm still advocating for sidewalks and connectivity in the city of Houston. So I share that because the research that we share is meaningful, but this doesn't happen really without a real dialogue and discussion. So one of the features, we kept this as a meeting, not a webinar. So Link isn't going to be talking at us. They want to talk with us. So the chat box is open. Don't get too crazy in the chat box because that's also being recorded. So, if you want to run for elected office, you may want to monitor how you're putting that language in there. But if you have questions or comments, or there's something passionate about that you really want to share, let's put it in. And so I'm going to kick it off to Ashley Johnson to make introductions on the Link side. And yeah, just lead us into a good conversation.
Sounds good, Veronica, and thank you very much. First of all, let me give a welcome to all the participants today for your attendance for today's presentation. My name is Ashley Johnson, and I am the Community Affairs Director with Link Houston. Before we begin, a big thanks that I want to extend to the East End District for helping us host this conversation this morning. Link Houston is a nonprofit organization which advocates for a robust and equitable transit network so that all people can reach opportunity. Whether it be by walking, rolling, biking, or by riding transit, public transit is the backbone of Houston's deeply affordable transportation network, and riders use this service each day to reach many types of opportunity. Today, we'll be discussing our Equity in Transit 2020 report. This report analyzes quantitatively from the Census Bureau and from other sources, and also qualitatively with data from residents and from transit riders to understand transit's current role in connecting people to places and how transit can equitably improve. We focus especially on local bus in our organization. We realized that this report last month and the report now is a follow-up to our 2018 baseline report. This report, its executive summary, are also available in English and Spanish. Plus, we have a story map and videos of resident interviews, which can also be found at our website, www.linkhouston.org. Look under the section entitled How We Work-Reports. Management districts and tax increment reinvestment zones, or TIRZs, play a crucial role in advancing the region's inclusive economic growth, prosperity, and progress. Transit, as we know, is an essential service, and it connects people to economic and other types of opportunity. This is even more apparent during COVID-19 as frontline employees, workers in healthcare, grocery stores, and in many other essential roles can continue to ride transit in Houston, especially the local bus. During the late spring and summer, a majority of Metro Park and Ride trips were to and from the Texas Medical Center. The highest sustained ridership from March of 2020 to today is on the local network, bus rapid, and light rail. As we see society emerging into a quote unquote new normal, one thing is clear. Local transit continues to play an important role, and management districts and TIRZs continue to be the central stakeholders for transit. Your organizations build the sidewalks, the bus stops, and in some cases, the systems to and from transit centers, trains, and buses that connect people and businesses as employees and as customers. Our aim today is to examine the state of equity in transit and to discuss the important role that your organizations will play now and in the future. I'd like to turn the program over now to Lake Houston's Director of Policy and Planning, Jonathan Brooks, who will now present the details of the Equity in Transit 2020 report. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Ashley. This is Jonathan Brooks with Lake Houston. We first like to go around the virtual room we have here and take a moment, unmute yourself. We've already talked about the camera on and off deal, so I think those of us who are, feel free to pop on for just a second if you want. Share your name, which organization you're with, or if some of you may have multiple hats you wear, and the title, the role that you play there. Due to time, we're not asking people to share too much at this time in the conversation about some of the things they're working on, but there will be plenty of time for discussion and Q&A later on. And so please just name, organization, title, role. And then if you want to, if you have some thoughts, go ahead and start using the chat box. There's no particular order. So I might just myself take liberty. And the first person on my participants list is Mary Hookfish. Mary?
Hi, yes, I'm with Central Houston, and just happy to be here today and listening to all of this. I'm sorry, my title and role is Architect Urban Planner on the North Houston Highway Improvement Project.
And then Alice Lee.
Good morning. I'm with Hawes Hill and Associates. I'm also the Executive Director for the Southwest Management District.
And I have a suggestion here to name off a few people at a time so that people can be preparing. So we'll go to the 832-457 number, and then Bo Fraga, and then Don Hummel. Who's joining us by phone on the 832-457-7280?
Dave Gilkison, West Chase District.
Good morning, Dave. What do you do at the West Chase District, if I may ask?
I'm the Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you for joining us. Bo?
Hi, good morning. I work for Baker Ripley as a senior community engagement developer. And then I also live in the second ward in the East End district. And I'm a director of TERS 23, which I think that's more directly connected to talking about infrastructure. And so that's those are my connections to here. Thanks for doing this. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Bo. Mr. Hummel.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Don Hummel. I'm the Senior Project Manager for Hawes Hill and Associates. And this morning I have the pleasure of representing a couple of TERSs, primarily TERS number 8, which is the Gulfgate TERS. And shout out to our board chair, Sonny Garza, and also TERS number 9. And I just want to say good morning to Tondalin. It's nice to see you. And also TERS number 25. And Director Anderson, it's nice to see you as well, sir. And I'm happy to be part of this meeting. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining. The participants list moves around on me a little bit as people make different actions. So if I do in the end miss someone, just jump in. But George Anderson, and then Thomas Broad, and T. Weaver. Mr. Anderson.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is George Anderson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Fountain of Praise. I'm here today with TERS 25 and the Five Corners District. And so just hats off to Link Houston for providing this forum and this space for us to gather information.
It's certainly our pleasure.
Good morning, I'm Tom Broad. I'm retired from Memorial Hermann, so I have lots of time to be a trustee with TERS 10 and the Lake Houston Redevelopment Corporation, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. T. Weaver?
Good morning. I'm Tondalin Weaver. I am the chair for TERS 9. I am also part of a tri-party committee, which includes TERS 25 and the management district in our area, kind of under District K, which is Martha Casix Tatum. I just left the Kingdom Builder Center 9 years, and I am now with Lift Fund as their executive in residence, and the the director of the Ascend Houston program, helping small and minority contractors to build and grow their capacity. So I too am very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Next up, I'll call on the 713-645-3000 number, and then Alice Lee and Andret Rayford. If you're on the 713-645 number, feel free to unmute yourself and say hello. If not, we can swing back around to you. Why don't we go ahead and move on to Alice Lee and then Andret Rayford.
I've already been introduced. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Okay. Alice?
I've already introduced myself. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay. Look at a lot of names here. Andret, would you please briefly introduce yourself? And then Annabeth?
Good morning.
Trent.
I'm Andret Rayford. I'm a community engagement specialist with Link Houston.
Annabeth Tercios. I'm going to get that wrong.
Good morning, everybody. Annabeth Tercios with Greater Northside Management District, Deputy Director. Thank you for having us join today as well.
Annie Trin.
Hi, good morning. This is Annie Trin. I'm with the Southwest Management District as Director of Services, and I'm also with TERS 20.
Thank you for joining us. But how about Beth Strope, Debney Greenlee, and then Eileen Egan?
Hi, good morning. This is Beth Strope. I'm with the Hobby Area Management District, and I apologize for the video. I'm actually in the car coming from another meeting. So
thank you. Please be safe on the road.
Good morning, everyone. I am Debney Greenlee, partner with Impact Strategies Consultants, currently working with TERS 9, TERS 25, and the Five Corners Management District on mobility initiatives. Glad to be here.
We're glad you're with us.
Eileen Egan with the Near Northwest Management District on VP of Capital Projects.
Good morning. Elizabeth Witten, Gerald Wilson, and then Gina.
Good morning, everyone. This is Elizabeth Witten, and I am the Transportation and Mobility Manager at the Energy Corridor District.
Gerald, Mr. Wilson.
Hi, I'm Gerald Wilson, the Capital Projects Manager for the OST Alameda TERS number 7 and the Houston Southeast Management District.
And Gina? If you are speaking, you're on mute. Next up, I'll ask Greg Simpson, Jessica Bacorn, and Kirk Jackson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Greg Simpson. I'm the president of the North Houston Management District. It's good to see you.
And you did turn on your camera, so you must have, your makeup person showed up.
Guilt and shame is a powerful forces. So good to see everyone.
We think of it positive peer pressure.
Yes, that's it. That's it. We'll go with that. Thank you.
It works sometimes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Kirk Jackson.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Kirk Jackson. I am a community engagement specialist for Link Houston.
We'll have to at least say who we are.
And Elia Coyles, you're welcome to go ahead and unmute again and say hello.
Hi, this is Elia and Noah Quiles with Up Art Studio, and we are a subcontractor to multiple TERSs and management districts.
And our mission is really simple. It's civic pride or civic art, where we educate, move, and engage people through public art.
Sounds very interesting. Let's see, Lola, I'm going to let you say your last name because I don't want to butcher it on recorded audio.
No problem. It's Ladajobi, Lola Ladajobi. Good morning, everyone. I am the Transportation Planning and Management Intern with OST Alameda Redevelopment Authority, Tier 7. And thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. And I'll try to get your name right. Natalie Hurtado, the Near Northwest District, and then Ani Blair.
Good morning, Natalie Hurtado. I'm with Hostel and Associates and also the Executive Director for the International Management District.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Ani Blair, and I'm the Executive Director of Link Houston. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.
Your Northwest District.
Hello, I'm Wayne Norton. I'm the president of the district.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Norton. Sherry Wiesner, Sarah Hutchison, and Sylvia Rivas.
I'm Sherry Wiesner, and I'm with TERS 5, 13, and 15.
There are some individuals that have not yet called on, and then we'll do a kind of a catch-all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sylvia Rivas. I'm a resident of the Braes Oaks area and serve multiple community positions on the Maplewood West Civic Association, also serving as presidents of the Braes Oaks Super Neighborhood 36, and as well as the board of directors for the management district in my area. Thank you all. Glad to be here.
Thank you for joining. Thomas Broad, Tony Allender. And then anyone else who has not had the opportunity at this time, please jump in, say hello.
I was already. Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Hi, my name is Jessica Bakecorn. I am the Executive Director of the East Downtown Management District. Thank you for having me today.
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
This is Rebecca Reyna with Greater Northside Management District. I'm the Executive Director and I'm glad to be on this call.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
This is Helen Bonsall. I'm the chair of the Hobby Area Management District and general manager of the DoubleTree at Hobby Airport.
Thank you for joining.
Hi, this is Eric Lyons. I'm with Impact Strategies Consultants, and I also work with Tiers 25, Tiers 9, and the Five Corners Management District.
Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Allender with Hawes Hill and Associates, serving as staff for TERS 23 and also providing community development, economic development assistance for a variety of other management districts and reinvestment zones.
Thank you for joining us. Has anyone not had the opportunity?
Yes. Hi, I'm Sarah Hutchison. I'm a staffer in State Representative Allen's office.
Thank you for joining us. I called on you earlier, then I probably moved on too soon. So thank you for getting in.
Good morning. This is Kelly Aylward. I'm a Manchester and Chester Cento with the West Bay District.
It was a little difficult to hear everything that you said, but you're with Hobby Airport area?
No, we're with West Chase District. Did you hear that?
It's a little difficult to make out. I'm sorry.
West Chase District.
West Chase.
West Chase, okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining. If there's someone else who's not spoken up, just at some point in the conversation today, make yourself known or drop your information in the chat. I'm going to start sharing my screen again. And
Jonathan, before you
yes.
share screen, hold on, get us back to the grid. I'm going to ask you to pick a number between 1 and 38.
Me?
Yes, pick a random number between. I've got 38 beautiful boxes between 1 and 38. We're going to 23. Okay, because 23 is going to get a door prize this morning.
Huh?
And that is Eric Lyons. Eric Lyons.
Yeah.
I'm buying you margaritas and a fajita platter from Ninfa's. I gotta send you the gift card.
Hey, this is a great meeting. A great meeting. A great session. Oh, it's wonderful.
Right. So, Mr. Lyons,
Eric, remember your friends. Remember your friends.
Oh, that's right.
Remember the chair of 9, okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So, sir, you got to send me your email. I got to get your email and phone number because I want to get you that gift card.
Oh, you'll get it.
But we want to make your Friday happy.
Oh, it's already great. It's already great. So.
Transportation equity meets the prices right. Thank you, Veronica.
Shall I proceed, Veronica? All right. So what we're going to do today is not dominate the conversation with presentation. As Veronica said earlier, we do want to share some information, but we want to have dialogue. And that's why this is an open meeting and in the meeting format where anyone can participate in any way. Let me get my slides advancing. So I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes, provide some background on where we were in 2018 and the last 2 years, and then what we did at Link Houston to update the report that we're discussing today. But the larger matter is the subject matter. Right? It's not necessarily just the report, it's the what are we trying to do here in our city, in our region, for our residents, for our constituents, and for each other. And then after that 10 minutes or so, we'll do some Q&A and discussion. We can answer any questions. We have a few questions we want to pose to the group. Anyone's welcome to jump in there, and also just respond in the chat if that's what you prefer. And then we'll present another 10-15 minutes, and then the rest of the conversation will be discussion. And so without further ado, I'd like to briefly highlight in 2018, so Link Houston was established in 2017. In fact, Ani Blair, our executive director, who you've heard introduce herself, was hired the same week that Harvey occurred. Difficult happenstance. And Harvey, like COVID, is showing us things about our transportation needs of our communities. In 2018, a year after Harvey, in the fall, we issued really our organization's first report, where we wanted to dive into what is equity, what is transit in Houston, who rides transit in Houston, and establish a baseline of information. And so this document is still available on our website, and this was just over 2 years ago now. The report also had put forward 4 recommendations with quite specific ideas, primarily for Metro, but also for the city of Houston and for organizations that all of you are affiliated with. We recommended changes on frequency, how often transit comes, how available the service is, the hours that it's available, how on time the service is. You know, it's as bad for transit to be late as it is, it's as bad for it to be early and pass you while you're walking to the stop as it is for it to be late. And so we talk about that. And then just as important as the other 3, accessibility. You can have great transit, great frequency on the street, but if people can't get to and from it safely, and especially if for individuals that have a disability of any type, making the service more accessible. We also did analysis in 2018 to try to help identify where should we objectively try to focus efforts to advance equity, right? It'd be wonderful to be able to improve these things everywhere, and bring everything up to just a marvelous level of service, a marvelous level of access. The reality we're all very aware of is our limited resources and competing interest when it comes down to it. We also equity is about working on changing things that have to do with past impacts and inequities. And as Veronica talked about that, it's not just trying to get to proportional, it's trying to be strategically disproportionate in our improvements. And that's a difficult thing to do. Proportional is hard enough to do. You might have seen this map if you saw that report in 2018. This was a map in the document that overlay the 4 areas of most pronounced demand for equity and especially transit, overlaid on yellow special districts and purple TERSs. There's not a similar map in the 2020 report, but we're going to discuss that today because we wanted to hear from y'all firsthand and see what kind of information could we help provide. So that was 2018. It set a baseline. It was a rather lengthy report. In 2020, the report is less than 15 pages, and it focuses on where have we made progress and where is the progress that remains. And the document is available on our website, and we'll put that in the chat and email that also. We continue to center equity, and I want to briefly just remind everyone, our definition of equity is not just the important definition of personal equity, meaning providing the means for individuals with varying abilities, capacities, amounts of wealth, to have access to, in this case, on the image, an apple. That's important. But when it comes to transportation, we all probably understand there are different levels of quality in the built environment for a lot of reasons. There's also different opportunities available in some communities than others. And we're not going to fix all of these by having everything available everywhere. So we need to think about how do we improve access to opportunity and the quality of that access strategically. In the 2020 report, we want to be very clear that the information we put forward and the recommendations are heavily influenced by our community engagement of the last couple of years and working with organizations like yours and through the Houston-Galveston Area Council and working with the city, but especially with community members and residents, transit riders. And on our website, there are videos, all of these individuals on the screen here, Hugo, Duanetta, Keith, Heina, Miss Avalos, I always have a trouble with their first name, and Ashley. We interviewed people and we held community roundtables to learn, are these the priorities that would improve transit for people meaningfully? And what should we learn from that? And those videos are available on YouTube as well as our website at the same place the report is. Over the last 2 years, many of y'all are probably well aware of this. And in fact, y'all have had roles in some of these, local government, other partners making progress. We'd like to, my broad point here of Metro, City of Houston, the Commission on Disabilities, Harris County, there's been a lot, the last 2 years has been quite busy in terms of planning and implementing some bikeways and trails. There have been transit improvements. There's been a lot of activity. And the broad takeaway from our view on this is that and some of these do discuss equity and try to address equity, and others are more just improvements to the system. The capacity for elected officials, city, county officials, regional officials, to be talking about equity and trying to act in ways that advance equity is improving. And there still is a lot of work to remain, both from y'all's sides and from your organization's work, but also from advocates like us and our partners and the public. We need to continue to work and make sure that these plans and the resources that they should bring to bear are implemented in ways we all view as equitable, and that there are opportunities to really make change. I want to talk briefly about how there is continued demand for equity. This map is a map of Metro's network. You can see the network extends over much of Metro service area. The yellow lines are park and ride networks out to more suburban areas. The red, green, and blue lines are local bus. And then the black and white thicker lines are light rail or bus rapid transit, which if you've not had the opportunity to go ride the new Silver Line in the Galleria Uptown area, it's our first bus rapid transit line. And we'll talk about that more later because bus rapid transit is very central to Metro Next. And the main point here is that we have a network, but the network is not, there are areas where there's far more red and blue where there's more frequency, and there are areas where there's more green and less frequency. Should that concern us? What should be done? These are the questions we try to answer. Just in case someone's not aware, we'll briefly talk about COVID. Can't ignore the impact of COVID on all aspects of life. Metro was seeing gradual ridership increases and sustaining ridership, which has not always been the case in other regions of the US up until March last year, and saw a very significant decline. And Park and Ride, the commuter network, is still down 85% of ridership as of December. For a lot of different reasons, we probably can guess about remote work, et cetera. The local network, though, the story here is that while ridership declined, it also maintained about 45% of ridership throughout, even in the depths of the first lockdown. And it continues to gradually increase. This is through September. We can now update this for a few more months. And that's partly because Metro was quite proactive. And so we have a positive opinion of Metro's response to COVID overall. They were quite proactive. They made service changes when they had to, as has happened across the United States. But those service changes have been fairly equitable in that they were applied systemically, and Metro did not eliminate any particular route. That's not, again, not always been the case in the United States. And so we're positive about that. We're not starting from as much of a hole in terms of working back towards full services. And in fact, this month they implemented new service changes and got back to regular scheduled information. And so we're positive there. And this is talked about more in the report. Mr. Downey and other people we interviewed talked about how there's even a more, just like Harvey flooded a lot of cars, flooded a lot of homes, disrupted the economy at all scales, individuals and the region. The same thing is happening with COVID, but things predated this. 20% of Kashmir Garden residents still didn't have vehicles before, by choice, by economic necessity, all those things. And it's not an area where there's a lot of frequent transit. So in brief, pardon me, we paired the stories with an update to an index we made in 2018. The index, I won't labor the details here. Many of you are used to seeing maps and looking at trying to decide where you do different things. At Link Houston, we were concerned about, in transit planning, planners talk about activity density, where are there people, where are there jobs, and where we put transit to meet those needs, where are their origins, where are their destinations. And that's an important reality, but it's not the whole story, because it doesn't talk about what led to those conditions and the quality of the built environment. And in the advocacy world, there are indexes about just the social vulnerability, and other aspects on a more personal household level. But if you look at those separately, it can be difficult to talk to an audience, convince one side or the other to change anything. So we made an index that combines the built environment information, walkability, but also households with no vehicles, and where there are jobs that pay less than $15,000 a year, et cetera. And this is the Transportation Equity Demand Index. We updated this in 2020. It's the same methodology, just 2 more years of recent data. On this map, you see by census block group, where there's darker red, there's generally a higher, pardon me, relative demand for better transit and walking and biking, as opposed to other block groups in the metro area. Some of you may serve districts that have boundaries that go outside metro service area. We'd be happy to hear from you if that's something you would like us to update this information at some other geography. Right now, it focuses on metro service area, but we are happy to entertain doing some more analysis to help you. The 3 areas that are shaded in black, basically the southwest quadrant of Houston, Sharpstown, Gulfton, extending down past south of 59, and then the greater east side, the east side of Houston, kind of southeast Houston, and Greenspoint are the 3 areas that statistically come up as very high demand for equity and transportation in general. And that can be, those are the improvements. We're not specifying, here's the things you need to do in each of these roadway corridors or neighborhoods, but these are the 3 groups of neighborhoods that have a very pronounced demand. If you overlay that with where frequent transit exists on Sunday, then you see there are these are on this map, if you can see it, are the black dots marked bus stops that have frequent service on Sunday between the hours of 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. Why Sunday? Sunday is when transit's least frequent. And so if you have frequency on Sunday, you by definition also have it on the weekdays. And so it's kind of the most strict measure of where's our network the most robust. There are areas where these 3 high demand areas have frequent service on Sundays, and there are gaps as well. Notably in Greenspoint, parts of the east side especially, and parts of the further west in the southwest going north-south. You have a lot of east-west service on some corridors, but not a lot of north-south. And so, and then there are areas of Metro services that don't have frequent service on Sundays. Even though Metro has made significant investments in their network on weekends in the last 5-6 years, there's continued opportunity here. And this predates COVID. This would be a little even more challenging right now. There's more information in the report. And we have each of the 15 measures, maps by super neighborhood. But one thing I would like to know let's take a little, I'm going to stop presenting for a second. First, I invite you to soften your forehead, unclench your jaw, relax your shoulders. Make sure you're not holding yourself in bad posture. Too bad. I'm guilty of that. Take a little break, stand up and stretch. Are there any questions about this information so far? And we can take 5-10 minutes here, and then I'll talk about our recommendations. Excuse me again, my voice, I don't know why it's going. If there are general questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or pop a question in the chat. There also are 2 questions on the screen. How does your organization prioritize your work? We all have to work within some mechanism, some need to prioritize. How does transit figure into that process? How does equity figure into that process? Also, just what are some of the opportunities to improve how we do that kind of prioritization? Or are there policy changes that are needed? Are there changes that could be made to funding streams or call for projects or what have you to advance equity? I'm going to stop talking.
Bo, thanks for this, and really appreciate the report y'all did. So whenever I see a map of Houston, I'm reminded, and what I've heard several times, and I'm sure y'all can address this, is that the underlying challenge we have to public transit is the fact that we're so huge and spread out. We're the poster child, if you will, in a negative light for urban sprawl. So how, is that? I do see that is the case, but that seems to be an excuse that in general is put up that that we can't really make any improvements. I hope I'm making sense of what I'm asking. If you can address that briefly, and I think that's going to underlie, in general, whatever we do moving forward as, as community, as TERSs and districts. But and again, when you put these maps of Houston, it just seems so overwhelming, and so I want to see if you can address that briefly at least, or touch on that.
I think it's a very relevant question, Bo. And you're right. We sometimes limit our ambition as a city and region by thinking too much the past determines too much of our future. A few thoughts. I can't offer a comprehensive answer to all aspects of that, but a few thoughts I would share. I think that as we think about this, is that one thought is that in 2015, when Metro did the new bus network, which was largely determined based on where jobs are, where people were, and they redid the bus network. That did improve service in some areas. It reduced service in others, as some of you probably can attest to, have experienced. But that was partly because it assumed that if you have 1,000 people per square mile in one area and 500 people per square mile in another, you should put more service where there's 1,000 people. But the reality is that for a lot of reasons, some neighborhoods have much higher ridership per capita, despite density, and we don't need to go into the reasons of that why, but there are things that when we're overly data driven, we lose some of the reality there. So that's some of the ways that Metro has since 2015 added service back in some areas, but we look to Metro Next to really change some of that. Also, because transportation planners, I include myself in this, as an industry and as a profession, are too often guilty of not viewing their work as a policy, as something that is setting, we sometimes see our work as there's already going to be demand for this. We must build this capacity, this roadway capacity, because there's going to be development. Well, we do know in other regions of the United States that have experimented with this and maybe view things differently. If you more strategically manage where you make improvements, it does have transportation can influence what happens after, and we can choose some of our own future. And that's just a few thoughts. But there are locations in Houston where ridership outperforms what would be expected based on just quantitative data. And some of that is due to equity reasons and populations that are more amenable to relying on transit. And last thought I'll leave with everyone is in any given part of the United States, but especially in Houston and in urban centers, urbanized areas like our region, 20 to 30% of the population either does not drive or would choose not to drive if they had good alternatives. And if they do use a car, it's because they're relying on someone else. There's a good portion of our population in Houston that not only rely on transit, but that are a market for alternatives. And the built environment, though, is very important because fixed route service can be great, but if you can't get to and from it. And there was a period of time.
They're always at the end. You have to flip, see.
Jonathan, I'm going to have you repeat that last sentence.
Remind me, I was distracted. Yeah.
Sorry, the built environment was very important.
So the built, well, we have to look at the recording. I was going to say that the built environment is important because it connects people to the service. And there was a period of time in Houston where, for a lot of reasons, development did not occur where we built sidewalks, and it's difficult and expensive to retrofit them now. I think that we're getting better at that, but there's still a lot of progress to be made at just requiring better infrastructure to begin with, so that then people can choose alternatives, a variety of things. Because it's not just transit to go a long ways. It can be the ability to walk and bike down your street to do some of your trips without having to drive a short distance. So I hope that's some thoughts. Someone else is welcome to join in. This doesn't have to be just me.
Well, and Jonathan, as people are forming their questions, let me ask this. Y'all present some really sophisticated data that I know like we as a smaller shop and some of my friends here can't do in-house. How do we get access to that information? Like if we want to zone in on them, is that helpful for the group? Y'all want free access to Jonathan's free data? And look, we're getting some smiles.
Yes.
Yes. All right, Link Houston.
Yeah, so the report has the broad scale maps. We have not gone through the effort already to create tailored maps for each of our organizations. However, we're happy to, and you may have saw this last fall, maybe we made how to get to your voting centers maps for every super neighborhood, all 88. We are happy to take some of our information and basically have our GIS make maps for each of your districts, kind of more automatically. And so you can use those if it might help you identify some priorities for projects or strengthen an application for a grant. We're also happy to entertain. You can ask us. We won't promise we support. We don't necessarily support every project, but we are selective. But we're happy to provide our information and consider supporting grant applications that we believe do advance equity. And so feel free to reach out to us.
Jonathan, I'd like to kind of make a comment on what you said, and that is, yes, Houston is urban, it's also suburban. We are a suburban management district, but we have the second highest concentration of apartments behind Gulfton. So we have areas where we may have 15 to 20% of households with no car. So the one high frequency route that runs within our 16 square miles is the Antoine Drive route that you showed on the map. We also, when you showed the map with all the routes, the big gray area with no metro routes at all, there was a big chunk of us out in that northwest quadrant. So there's also that equity of, you've got taxpayers out here and they're not being served at all. So just, we need to, as we have the discussions, we can't just talk about high density in terms of need for service.
Absolutely. And I thank you for your comments, Eileen. We completely agree. Maybe I wasn't clear enough that we think density's had too much to do with it in the past. There are a lot of other factors, and it's a lot more nuanced. It makes it more difficult planning work, but more meaningful outcomes. I see there's been some chat activity. Is there? Okay, no questions there. What if we?
One quick point, Jonathan. A couple of additional people have entered on here. I just wanted to notice Vanessa Sampson the executive director with the 4th Ward. TERS number 14 is on here. Thank you for coming. And also another person on the staff with the Greenspoint North Houston District, Alexa Valencia, is here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all for joining us. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Also, do we have someone from the mayor's office that's joined us by phone on the 3000 number? If so, you're welcome to introduce yourself as well. And then Alice Lee, you have a question. You wanna...
Yes, thank you. Since, you have shown on your map that the disparity also includes parts of the Southwest Management District. So we would like to invite Link Houston back to our committee. I think y'all came a couple years ago before COVID, and it's probably time to invite you back to give us an update to our committee.
We'd be happy to do that. We are happy to make presentations both with your leadership, staff, or at a meeting with the public. And as you've heard, we have some other community engagement folks on the call here. I'm going to jump back into PowerPoint. Feel free to go ahead and someone can unmute and still ask a question, but I'm going to start sharing again. And then we'll just have a few minutes of presentation, and then we'll get right back to this conversation and spend the rest of our time there. So let me share screen here. We had our 4 principal recommendations from 2018, which I already mentioned, are still the fundamental ways to improve equity in transit. And on our document, we briefly illustrate some of the ways that Metro has and has not, or other stakeholders have and have not advanced the recommendation. In terms of frequency, our first recommendation, we believe Metro is generally on route here, primarily because they did respond to some community requests for improvements. And prior to, right when COVID struck, for example, Metro was having meetings with Gulfton to do some route adjustments there, and they were to add some frequency. And they did this similar in the northeast part of Houston. COVID disrupted some of those, but in general, they're on route here largely because Metro Next, the 20-year plan, has a lot of elements we believe will advance equity, most especially the local network improvements. The boost corridors that are basically really great local bus. Metro is working on several of those. And in the 2021 budget they approved last fall, they did not, they continue to do the planning and engineering work to keep those projects on track. It was a question of resources due to COVID, but the organization's continuing there. And there's more detail in the document. In terms of span of service, the availability of service, this is an area where Metro Next and Metro hasn't really made any specific commitments. If there are changes to when service is available based on Metro Next, it's route by route. And basically means that if a boost corridor, for example, all the infrastructure improvements means the bus can be more on time and run more frequently with less delay, then that might free up some resources to add some span of service earlier or later. But we were looking for more systemic change here, especially later in the evening. Metro service starts fairly early, and that works for many employees, but for people that work into the evening, it can be quite difficult to rely on transit. Reliability, this is how on time the bus is. There have been modest improvements, especially up to prior to COVID. And during COVID, reliability is unfortunately, it's almost out the door, because the reality is that just keeping service publicized to the public and operating at some level of frequency has been the priority. There's opportunities to continue to improve reliability. Accessibility, Metro has made a lot of progress here, and in partnership with organizations like yours and the city, with Harris County, especially Commissioner Ellis, Commissioner Garcia, and Friends Over Lake Houston mentioned Commissioner Cagle, improving bike access and walk access. Specifically, Metro itself has continued to spend significant resources on improving accessibility of their stops. But their mandate as a transit authority is to only improve accessibility to a certain extent around stops or facilities. And then from there on, it's this convoluted network of responsibility from the property owners themselves to public sector organizations like yours that work to make those improvements. And so there's a lot of opportunity here to continue to make improvements. It's very meaningful because if someone's accessible for someone with a disability, with lower mobility, then it's going to work great for everyone else also. So it's a very, and to do these things equitably where you're prioritizing stop improvements where, for example, one frame of mind that we put forward is that it touches several of our recommendations is, would you, if you're using a bus route that's every 60 minutes, how likely is it you're waiting longer than someone using a bus route that comes on average every 15 minutes? You're likely to wait longer because if for no other reason, because you want to be to that stop even earlier, because if you miss your bus, you know it's another hour and you might not be able to get to work. Or if you get to work, it's because you got a taxi or Uber and it took your entire day's wage practically to make that trip. And so people at use lower frequency routes make a lot of different decisions. That means they would actually benefit more from a shelter or from a bench, or if there were street trees or something, shade to relieve from heat. That goes contrary again to some of the more traditional ways of prioritizing bus stop improvements. And so we talk about that in the document and with Metro. And in conclusion, here's a map of Metro Next with the three transportation equity high demand areas. You can see that on this map, there are transit services planned to be improved in each of the three areas, including Greens Point. But there are areas that probably would like to see more improvements. And some of the most meaningful improvements for many transit riders are the stop level improvements that many of your organizations take a lead on in your respective areas. And little adjustments to service. One additional bus trip. You don't need maybe 4 more hours of service, but one more later bus trip can make a big difference to transit riders. We want to reinforce that these three high demand areas are just the areas that statistically come out as concentrations of higher demand. They're not the only areas we're concerned about quality in transit. That the earlier maps I showed where they had every single block group, that there are block groups outside these three high demand areas that have just as pronounced a demand. They're just not part of a whole area, perhaps, that has the same amount. So if we would be happy to, based on request, make maps tailored to your jurisdictions that have the block group data or particular measures, and that could be done. We're not talking about something we're asking for a fee. Obviously, we welcome donations, but more so, we see that as a natural follow-on to this work. We're happy to do that because it advances our mission and our aims on behalf of transit riders and the public and equity, but also helps you in your work. So I leave you with a thought from Ms. Avalos. She's a community engineer, actually with Baker Ripley. Bo, I think, knows Ms. Avalos. I encourage everyone to utilize it, meaning transit, to give yourselves the opportunity to get to know the routes that are spread widely throughout the city. She spoke quite passionately in her interview about herself using Metro, but also believing in the service and then the experience it can provide. And I will say personally, I agree that there's not very many better ways to learn your community. Maybe biking around and walking around extensively. Riding the bus gives you a chance to just sit and look, though. And you see things about a community that sometimes you're too busy to notice when you're trying to drive because you're trying to focus on being safe. We also have a report we did last year in May with the Kindred Institute about affordable housing and transportation. Recommend checking that out if you're interested there, if you aren't aware. And I'll stop sharing my screen. We want to use this last half hour to talk about what we can be doing, how we can help, what opportunities y'all see, how do we advance equity together. So before I do stop sharing those, just quickly, ways to support our work at Link Houston are to do your work even better. That's the best thing you could do, is incrementally center equity in your work even more. Think very genuinely and work very genuinely to understand the needs of your residents that are walking and biking for practical access to life, that use transit. And then, of course, as individuals, we welcome donations, and then just be engaged yourself. So the report is on our website, and it's under reports and briefings, and there's other information there as well as the interviews. And there is a Spanish language executive summary, so if that is helpful. And also do let us know if there's another language or something else that would help you. For example, if you have board members who have a disability, the PowerPoint I shared now has extensive notes, and all the images have alternative text. So we could share a PowerPoint version that works well with a screen reader for someone with a visual impairment, for example. So again, thank you for your time. We have a half hour here for discussion.
Can I pop in?
Absolutely, Sherry.
This is Sherry. I think one of the things that I see that, and this is more about the people that are in this meeting rather than the specific link objective, but it feeds the link objective. One of the things that I don't think happens is that the management districts and the TERSs are not sort of directly sharing information about things that we're working on. So we're all sort of working on the areas that we're responsible for, which is absolutely our duty, and that's what we're supposed to do. But there's if there's another TERS or another management district 3 blocks away, they may be working on something, and a link might be possible to create a better way for bike riding, a better way for walking, a better access to a transit thing that we don't know about because it's not in our zone. It's 3 blocks away. And so I wonder if there's a way to create a link or an interactive map for all of us that we could put, we're working on this, and put it on the map, and somebody else put, we're working on this. I recently had experience in TERS 15. We're working on the Bastrop Promenade and looking for ways to link over with the work on the east part of Buffalo Bayou. But what was brought to my attention is that we're now 4 blocks away from the new cycle track on West Gray. And so creating a method to get from West Gray over into East Downtown, which then gets you over into East End, which then gets you to the east side of Buffalo Bayou Park. That's an amazing connection that I had no idea that we were talking about 4 blocks. So now we have a sub conversation going on with the various people in that area to figure out how we might figure that out. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not something that we can do instantaneously. But if I hadn't been aware of it, if somebody else hadn't been aware of it, we wouldn't be talking about it. So I think that that's a hole we have in how we all operate, that just figuring out a way to share this information would get us much further, much faster.
And Sherry, are you thinking with that, if that initiative took hold and there was a method to kind of easily start to put on a map that everyone else can see where projects are going and where thinking is, both if it's just at a kind of conceptual stage versus, hey, we actually are building this. It would also be easy to then have other information that's readily already created. You could turn off and on to kind of see context for that. Does anyone have an idea of a host for that kind of tool, or other thoughts about something, a project like that? Is there a particular repository or stakeholder that might naturally be a fit to lead that kind of project? Or
obviously the city could do it.
I will sign on to your support letter, Sherry.
This is Eric. I would also say maybe the Kinder Institute of Rice, maybe a place.
This is Eileen. Sherry coming in on it. Roxanne Okan-Vick proposed setting something up like that 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was underway because the city would know that this TERS was working on this and this TERS was working on something else, and the city could escalate a connecting project kind of thing. And it got started, but I don't know where it went from there or whose house that's under.
It does make sense that the city would, right? Because they oversee essentially TERS is and the districts, they're kind of the umbrella for us all. But something like this, I know nobody needs an extra meeting per se, but I think a gathering like this, every so often is also good. This is the first time I've come together with, multiple TERSs and districts, and I've been on our board for, since its inception, TERS 23, and a former board chair for the East End district. So I think something like this, again, it's also worthwhile. But I do agree that, Jonathan, as you were bringing up and Sherry, that the repository or the key stakeholder would be the city.
The problem, I think, one of the things for the city, and the city obviously has some tools, obviously the bike plan, but that's just a plan, it's static. My City, we all look at My City, et cetera, and you could put things on My City, but the problem with putting things on My City is that the public believes that means it's going, it's a thing. And this is really a planning imagination, sort of how can we make these things happen? And so we need to know what's there. We need to know what's actually in people's CIP and is going to go. And then we need to know the things that people are thinking about because that's how we move it forward. So I think it has to be a little bit less sort of that document that's the, here's what we have. It needs to be a more a planning or a shared information document.
This is Ani jumping in from Link Houston. Sherry, first of all, I think it's a great idea. The closest that exists, and I put this in the chat, is on the Houston bike plan, which is bike specific. So it doesn't get to all the other needs, which I find in many communities, it's really about the sidewalks, and bikes are not an issue at all. But the two parts of that, the 2 pages on that website, there is one that lists current projects or projects that are coming online. And then the actual interactive map is supposed to be doing what you're talking about, which is layering in everything. And so at least on the bike piece, there is a platform for this. And I think I'm always one to look for the good bones that you can build on because it's always cheaper and faster. So I think that's the place to really connect with Melissa Beeler at the City of Houston to make sure that all of the pieces are actually being captured by the TERS and management district. But for all the other projects, there isn't really anything. And this is something that came up when we did this presentation back in 2018. As Bo was saying, there was no forum because we asked at that meeting when we did this similar presentation for Equity in Transit 2018, where should we be going to engage with all of you on a regular basis? And everyone said there is no regular place where everyone meets. And so even that is useful, obviously, not only for you, but for organizations like us when we're trying to share information or find out what's going on in one place, because it is very difficult to track it down one by one.
So if I can ask.
I just want to comment too, we are about half inside the city. So, Bo, your point of, we're partly the city's creature, but we're also about half in unincorporated Harris County. And I've got 2 different commissioners courts. So, there's just these layers, what are the school districts doing? What is the city doing? What's the county doing? What's the state doing? What's flood control doing? And then what's the Parks Board doing? And we spend a fair amount of time just kind of trying to stay up on top of both the projects we've kind of proposed and pushed and encouraged that other people will be doing, and projects that they come up with that impact us or that are kind of close to us. Sometimes they come up to our border and stop, but if they're within a couple of miles, we try and keep up with it. But it's keeping a lot of plates in the air.
This is Jonathan. I have a question for the group. Would a useful first step that probably doesn't exist either be simply here's a list of all these or all your organizations that are on the call now, but also all the others, and here's the person that could be contacted to request GIS plan information, so like at least starting to build a roster of if someone wanted to ask each organization, hey, can you just provide us what information you have readily available? And then it can be thrown into a map pretty quickly. That'd be a starting point. Any thoughts about that?
Well, there are lists of us kind of all over the place.
Okay.
So there are lists, like the city has a list of management districts and TERS.
I mean, like, but specifically the GIS person, like who could answer a GIS question about projects?
But I wonder too, could HDAC be the role where something like this needs to reside?
We could ask.
They may be open to something like that. They certainly have they host quite a few GIS tools.
Well, they're funding some of our projects. So, right, guys?
Well, maybe it's something to try to get on the agenda for discussion at the Ped Bike Subcommittee and the Transit Coordination Subcommittee. Because it's really both, right? It's not just the transit. It's really kind of the holistic view of. That brings up another question with HAC too: is what are ways that your organizations can be, more prepared, more competitive, and also the HAC processes more emphasize equity, and there's probably a lot of opportunities there too in general.
That's a whole nother hour call.
Yeah.
Well, and Eileen, I want to acknowledge you said there are a lot of lists floating out, but getting the list together for this was an interesting. We stalked y'all on Facebook, LinkedIn. We stalked your cousins, whomever, your cleaning lady, whoever could give us an email to get this directory together, right? That's how it felt. So I was going to ask, is everyone on this call good if I distribute the spreadsheet that we have and you add a tab or you correct information? Because we really, everyone says they host one. Some of them are really dated. And I know we got some board members here too that are leaders. Would that be okay? I want to get permission to do that. Or some thumbs ups or some applauses if we're into that. Mm-hmm. And then the next question I would have, I think Sherry and Eileen have given us some great direction on how we could go to the city or to HGAC. Do we as a group, do we want to just float the ask and say because right here on this call, what do we have? Are we at 38, 40 participants?
37 right now.
Okay, and I'm guessing each of us at least has $1 million that we influence in infrastructure or ask for in some way. And I know for some of y'all, it's much more. But just think about the sheer number from the ask. That's a lot, y'all. There's literally millions of dollars on this phone call. This was probably the most important phone call in Houston today.
My suggestion might be that we actually approach the new director of traffic and transportation for the city, Veronica Davis. She comes from someplace else. She comes from a place that's highly interested in those interconnections, et cetera. So she might actually be a very good advocate at the city and at the HPW level to help us figure out how to integrate some of this. The other comment I was going to make was that TERS 27, which is the Montrose TERS, has actually put as part of their process is they've actually asked their engineering consultant on a minimum of an annual basis and probably a twice a year to actually meet with all the TERSs that touch the TERS, as in all the ones that are surrounding us. And interestingly enough, that has led to not a joint project, but a project where they found out one TERS was doing something, so they're adding to it, and they're asking another TERS to add to it, so that basically they're creating a much bigger structure that will be helpful to everybody. And so, each of us can actually work on that piece, is making sure that we set up those regular meetings with the people that are just around us.
And then could we all, TERS as management districts, obviously take it back to our boards, but essentially could we support the recommendations that Link laid out? The four, if I remember correctly, the 4 recommendations. Is that something that we can do, putting this out there as a general ask? And I think that kind of goes along with Veronica, where you were going with maybe.
You took it to a better place. So do we feel comfortable taking the link recommendations, putting it on our respective board agendas and say we support these efforts with our respective districts? Is that what you're?
Yeah, that's essentially what we're getting at. Tony,
Okay.
feel free to chime in and course corrective needed.
Oh, no course corrected needed. I think that would be great if we were to do something that, where all the groups can join in and basically show joint support. I think that would be pretty awesome.
I will remind everyone too that we are willing to create a set of maps that have the equity index over, with in your respective geographies and information, so that if you are making, if that is a conversation that occurs at your organization, that you have both the general report, executive summary, but also, and we can also make an interactive map of the same thing, but it might be helpful for you to also have maybe that's a question. A printable map that is letter or legal size, tabloid, is that as useful or more useful than an interactive map that you can access publicly online to show that as you zoom into your geography still is clear and visually and things like that are both useful. Any thoughts?
I'm guessing if it's an interactive map that we can scroll to on our iPads or phones for people when we're having calls or on our laptops, it's helpful. If you can embed a printing ability. It doesn't make for the prettiest, it's not going to have the prettiest headers and footers in our typically, but.
So an online map is easy to do. So I think we could do that regardless, but I don't like relying on it as if it is helpful to have a static image that is really very visually clear and provides the context of sources. So I think we could create a little batch process to create a map in PDF format, image format that you could each use. And again, those wouldn't be limited to the city of Houston boundaries. It'd be metro boundaries currently. But I know, for example, the Five Corners down there in the Southwest, y'all have area that goes across over there. We can take a look at that and see when we make a map like that, what is a gap in our analysis, and we could go, look at what you might want to do to fill that in. We have the information for all the surrounding counties. It's just to pick a frame for the conversation. We did focus on metro service area. It's not because we don't believe there are demands for equity in those other areas.
Sylvia is saying both maps would be helpful in the chat.
Yes, we can do both maps. So this is maybe seem like a little tedious question, but I'm just curious. It's helpful. What size of printable map is most helpful for some of y'all? Letter, 11 by 17, or do you prefer just a big map that you could choose to print any size, but it could also be printed on a poster? Anyone want to chime in and say what their personal preference is? I see in the chat 11 by 17. Is that pretty universally a good scale? I can get plenty of clarity on 11 by 17. Going smaller can be difficult to have anything meaningful. 11 by 17. Okay. We'll do 11 by 17, and we'll do that over the next little while. So,
Jonathan, really quick, something I wanted to note that came in here just a minute ago from Vanessa Sampson and from Fourth Ward TERS. And she was just talking about how the best way to get, information, I guess, in regards to, the subject matter we're talking about now on a TERS agenda is really to make a presentation in front of the TERS board on how participation, can have continual benefit on a project and on an area as a whole. So this is something that, I think that all of us individually, we can either take to our individual, our individual organizations, or maybe if there's information that we have presented today that you would like for us to make presentation for in front of your TERS boards, definitely just follow up with me or a member of our staff or something and see about coordinating that.
And I would jump in and add just real quickly too that while today, for discussion purposes and due to the depth of presentation, was a longer meeting, we can do a very succinct presentation as well. That's more of a much higher level. The executive summary is a one-page version. We can make a PowerPoint presentation or just a verbal presentation as well. We have staff members with Spanish ability as well, if that's something that is needed. Thank you for answering those questions for us. That's a way it helps us understand how to help y'all use information that we work very, very hard to put together. And I will again commend the videos, the stories. If there are excellent points made, these are people that use Metro and they're talking about really their experience, bad and good. And are there other questions people have? Or an example, kind of maybe a example to share of a project that you're working on now or thinking about doing that. I know talking briefly with Veronica, she had a thought about something that kind of, maybe it almost goes back to that map that Sherry Wiesner's point of identifying that there needs to be some information to connect these two things. The Houston's citywide bike plan and what Buffalo Bike Partnership is doing, and looking at, well, what should go between these? And y'all identified, right, Veronica, like a need for your own piece of bike plan to kind of fill that in. Any thoughts that you want to share about that?
Yeah, so with the management district, our revenue every year is limited because we really don't save. Our operations go towards maintaining. So what our board did about 2 years ago is we put some money aside in the budget specifically for an East End bike plan. And what we found is that there was multiple. It was the City of Houston, Buffalo Bayou Partnership, Bayou Greenway, and then we have B Cycle. And everyone was kind of doing their own plan, but when you were trying to ride a bike, you'd end up where we were missing some connectivity. And so the challenge was to go, we actually went to precinct 2 and they matched us dollar for dollar to do an East End bike plan. And I think the website is eastendbikeplan.com. And so I just share that as a success story because there's many partners in this room that are a part of that conversation. And it's the TERS, it's nonprofit organizations, it's developers who are contributing, like what segment or piece they're doing to kind of fill in the big picture. So we're about halfway through, we've done our analysis. But it's just a simple and easy success story, not very sexy to think about bikes or as an alternative mode of transportation. But what we found is the census data early on shows that we have car sharing in households, because we have a lot of also apartment complexes, at a higher rate than you do in other areas of the city. And so what happens when the one car doesn't make it and people got to get to work? So yeah, that's just an example. It's not taking this to scale for the city of Houston. I just can't wrap my mind around that, even though I feel like maybe that's what, right? Eileen's laughing because she's like, we've been trying to do this for how many years now?
I'm just my 16 square miles and that's giving me gray hair. So
on this same issue, TERS 27, the Montrose TERS actually did a walk bike study, and it's online on their website. It actually looked at condition of all sidewalks in the area, plus the conditions of all the bike lanes and the connectivity and so on and so forth. After looking at and seeing what TERS 27 did with that, TERS 13 has actually hired someone to do the same kind of study that East End is doing for TERS 13. And so their study is also sort of we'll get our preliminary copy of it here at the end of the month. We'll end up with a number of these things in different places, and TERS 27 most certainly has found the data to be extraordinarily useful in deciding what projects to do and how to do them, and in gaining a fair amount of grant money already. I expect TERS 13 will see the same kind of results. So, looking at that kind of data, I realize, sometimes we're too data dependent, but it sure makes applying for grants and figuring out which project needs to go first a lot easier.